Hello and welcome to another Divinity Original Sin 2 video. So, after having a little bit of a think to myself and getting a new microphone, I've decided to redo all the tier lists. So, this will be the final tier list that I do with a scribbled in underline underneath. So here we've got the Huntsman skill tier list. As you can see, I've gone with unique being the highest tier, and then common being the lowest, unranked. For skills that I find particularly difficult for whatever reason to accurately rank, I'm gonna leave them in the unranked or for whatever reason. So yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into the tier list. There is going to be some slight changes from previous ones, but majority of them will be the same. So we're going to start off with the glitter dust, which is going to go straight into common. This is something that you never really need to play around with. What it does is that it allows you to deny enemies from using stealth-like abilities, which is pretty rare to come across in the game anyway, and if you were to come across enemies, normally you can deal with them before they use it, or you can use spells that end up revealing them anyway. And the other thing that it does, it reduces their dodge chance by 100%, so which is cool and all, but typically if you got the gear, so maybe some buffs, hitting consistently really isn't going to be an issue for you, so really it just ends up being completely useless. And also you pick this up at like level 16 as well, so late game, so at that point you're going to be using Peace of Mind on characters, so yeah, it's just not going to see any use really at any point during the game. I would go with Tactical Retreat. Probably slip straight into the unique, so right at the top of the tree. Pretty obvious as to why it's so good. It's a jump ability for 1 AP. Requires 2 Huntsman, which is naturally pretty easy to get. It provides you haste, and that haste gives you additional AP and mobility during turn. So comparing to all the other jump skills, this is one that is by far and away the best of them all. Next we're going to go with the Ballistic Shot, which I deem to be a unique tier skill. So this is an extremely powerful, the most powerful skill the Huntsman has in terms of AP ratio and damage. The further away you are, the more damage it does. Every meter, I believe, is 5% extra damage, which is absolutely huge. So just imagine you're on high ground, the extra distance that you can cover, and yeah, it's gonna do a hell of a lot with that. With that hit, it is only a single target, but the damage it does is, you know, more than makes up for it, in my opinion. So yeah, top of the tree. Pindown. Pindown notoriously has been something I've completely rejected no matter what, but there is a time and a place for it. So the only way to use this well is from levels 1 to 15, and you're just using it as an opener. So you're using it before you enter combat. That is the only time you would use it. Reason being is it's 120% damage for 3 AP, which is really terrible in terms of AP and damage. It cripples with a soft CC. There's better CC available to a ranger there's better damage abilities in a ranger, and typically you want to keep your memory as trim as possible, which means there's other skills to be choosing before you would ever even consider using Pindown. So yeah, so the only time is between level 1 to 15. You would be using this to open fights. At 16 you can pick up Assassinate, which does the same job, but it does it much better. So at that point it becomes completely useless, but that is the only time you would use it. If you're not going to use it in that way, just avoid the skill altogether. So yeah, if you're going to be using it pre-combat in the way that I said, it would be uncommon. Otherwise it's a common, but we're gonna pretend that you're using it in the best way possible here. Okay, so one of the rarer AoE abilities that a Huntsman has is the Ricochet. Ricochet goes straight into Legendary for me. Does 90% per arrow, but if it hits 3 times it can do 70% spread over your targets. There's some really tricky things that you can do with it. Just really solid ability. You're gonna be using this from the beginning of the game. Easy access. Yeah, I mean, one Huntsman. You know, it's really solid skill. Legendary, as far as I am concerned. And then follow up with the barrage. Barrage, depending on where you're from in the world, that is how you pronounce it differently. So I'd put this on the legendary tier as well. Not as much widespread damage as the Ricochet, but what it does make up for is the utility, and it does allow you to be more efficient in your damage. You can split the arrows off. 180% for free AP is very good. And just the fact that you can split it off is what really kind of makes it a bit of a winner skill, in my opinion. You know, you might have one low HP enemy, you trigger one arrow on there and then do the damage elsewhere. You can use it for executions in various ways. It's a really good, solid, reliable skill, just like Ricochet is. And then we go to Elemental Arrowheads. Now, previously I have marked it in Divine, but I probably would just say Legendary. You can use this from the very beginning. Easy to use. For the most part, you're going to be wanting to pick up Blood with the Elemental Arrowheads. But it's flexible, which again is another thing I do like about it. Yeah, just one AP is 1 AP adds good amount, a solid enough amount of damage. It doesn't actually require you to actually hit that many times in order for the AP spent to make itself back up. And the good thing about it is that it scales really good the later in the game you go. So it starts off good, but then it gets even better at the end. But yeah, just like Barrage and Ricochet, you're going to be using this over time. Flexible, has its uses. Super nice to have around. We have Marksman Fang. You pick this one up at level 9. Requires 2 Huntsmen. You won't be using this as often as the Ricochet and Barrage, that's for sure. A positive for it is that it can convert all the buffs into piercing damage, which is really nice. Another positive is that it can hit multiple targets. For me, it's only really good when you can combine it with, say, Skin Graft or another character who can also do piercing damage. Reason being is that if you're going to be piercing, you want to kill those targets off. And far as I can think, you don't really tend to do that just using one of them. So it's much better if you're combining it with somebody else, or you're able to combine it with skin graft. For negatives, like I said, you won't really be using this super often, in my opinion. To get the AoE to land, it's a little bit fidgety. It's not easy to do that. So yeah, but yeah, nevertheless, I would say solid enough skill, one worth considering. Marksman Fang is in the epic. Skyshot. Skyshot has been something that I've really marked down in the past, and slowly but surely I am kind of realizing it's not as bad as I've always thought it is. So my thinking is I like to try to keep my memory as low as possible, which most of the time it doesn't actually leave space for me to actually use Skyshot. I much prefer having like the likes of Elemental Arrowheads, Ricochet, Barrage. You know, I value them much higher than Skyshot, which normally means Skyshot not making an appearance. In the early game, it's not really that significant that you use Skyshot because, like I said, the amount of memory that you want to be spending essentially on finesse instead, and then other skills taking priority. And then also it's a lot easier to use slowdown arrows where you can convert all that damage into physical, where Skyshot can't actually do that, and the damage between using Skyshot and the slowdown arrows are negligible. But this does change the further in the game that you go. The more skill points that you gain, the more likely that your warfare is going to be maxed out, which means that you end up spitting more points into Huntsman. Now, for those occasions where you're on the same level ground as your opponents, Skyshot really becomes quite valuable. So obviously the more points in Huntsman that you're getting, the more worth it is to use Skyshots. So yeah, previously I kind of marked it in common, uncommon. Common maybe terrible decision, but I would probably say rare is probably the best place for it. Reason being, it's not as valuable as the other skills. The times where you use it, it is going to be rare in itself, but during those moments it's really good, particularly in the late game. So maybe early game it's like here in the uncommon, but later in the game maybe it could even touch epic. But on balance of everything, I'd probably say Skyshot fits in the rare column, because most of the time you are able to get the high ground, but on these occasions that you're not, Skyshot's gonna do a great job for you. First aid, again, this is something that I've learned. I used to mark it a lot more higher, and to be honest, like taking it on paper value, it's an extremely good spell. What's not to like? It cleanses a bunch of really horrible, nasty crowd controls. It's 1 AP, it's 1 Huntsman, it's a heal as well at the same time. What's not to like? And it gives a nice buff, a protection buff too. But over time, I've kind of felt and learned that the heals are not so valuable, and if you're someone who is using a bedroll before fights, you do get the same buff that first aid provides. So as long as you've got that protection, it just becomes a heal, and heals are relatively weak in this game and not that valuable. So for me overall, I would put it in the rare. Now, the things that it cleanses is fantastic. Like some of the big ones is like the knockdown and silence, which is nice to get rid of. But once you gain experience and you really learn the game, but defensives are not as important as maybe other spells or skills. But at the same time, you still can't deny the utility it does bring if you're someone who is not using bedrolls, because this will cure and protect like glass cannon users, for example. So it's a really good spell skill on paper, but the more experience of the game you have and the better you are at the game, the more redundant it becomes. But it's still very good, I would say. So it's in the rare. Assassinate. Assassinate you pick up at level 16, which is quite deep into the game. You only need 3 Huntsman, which is no problem at that stage in the game as well. It's 3 AP for 140% damage, but if you're stealth, you get additional 50%. So it takes it up to 190% for 3 AP, which is very, very good damage. But like I've already touched upon, I think the best way to be using this is pre-combat. So you want to be using this to start off fights, because it's a really expensive skill. And obviously you're going to be doing this, the best thing to be doing to get the best out of the Assassinate is to be sneaking, and you don't want to be doing that during combat. So using it at the very beginning is preferable. So it's not as like flexible as like the Barrage, Ricochet, but once you do have this, you will be using this every single fight at the very beginning, and that is literally as far as it goes. So you will consistently be using it, but the downsides around it is that you pick this up so late in the game, and for me it replaces what Pindown would initially be doing for you. So yeah, for me, Assassinate's epic skill. So we've got 4 more left. We have Far Sight, which is considered to be completely useless by a lot of players, and to be honest, it generally is quite useless. What does it do? It grants you an extra 4 meters of range for 1 AP and 1 source point. So if you're someone who is using this and spending memory for it, it's terrible. You should avoid doing that at all costs. Now, the only times I could really see this being useful or something that you could consider is when you're later in the game, you've got a few memory slots opened up, and maybe if you're running Glass Cannon plus Water Rush, because at that point you are running 7 AP, you know, maybe at this sort of point and you have the spare slots and you don't have any other skills to put in, you could consider using this, and you could use this during combat if it's not going to affect your DPS, or you could use it just before entering combat as well. The way I see the Huntsman skills, you're not really going to be using your source points for much else. So if you're in that situation, it is something that could be considered. But yeah, for me, with what I've experienced so far, I've not used it at all. I've maintained keeping the memory as absolutely as trim as possible, and there's been no spare memory slots, so it's not like I've even been in a position to actually consider it. So I think if you're playing your game and you are not spending memory for it, and you can use it in the way that I've said, it could go in the uncommon, but from my experience of it, and just looking at what it is, 2 memory, source points for 4 meters range, and then trying to fit it in, it's like literally a last option. You're not going to really see any play of it. So it's super heavy in the common, but maybe you could find a use for it in your own games, but for me it's common. And then we have Reactive Shots. Now, it's kind of a cool skill. I kind of like it, I admit, but it's pretty much useless. For the most part, I would say it's pretty useless. It would be much better if you could use this pre-combat, but you can't, because then that could open up a good number of possibilities, and it would most definitely change my mind on where I'd rank it. Anyway, it doesn't matter because that's not how the skill works. So there's two ways to use this. Is this way in that you've got this for a ranger who is sitting, say, 2nd, 3rd, 4th in the initiative order. And this is not a very good way of using it, in my opinion, because on the first turn, ideally you want to be teleporting and never swapping all your enemies together to get them close so you can damage efficiently, right? Now, if they're like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, you're not going to get great use from the reactive shot in itself. And if they're moving around, it's not what should be happening anyway. And like I've already said, if you're doing all the teleporting stuff, that can't happen with the reactive shot on the battlefield, so you're missing out on that damage because of that. So if you're trying to make it work with a ranger who's not first in the initiative, it's gonna feel pretty scuffed in trying to use it. Also, I always kind of ask myself, well, I maybe could hit with a very basic attack with it 3 times, or I could target something that I want and I know that I'm going to do damage for. So for the most part, like if you're trying to use it like that, it's going to feel very janky and you're not going to get very good use out of it. I think the best way to use the reaction shot is to have it on a huntsman who is first in the initiative. Now the reason being is you set up your reactive shots, 2nd turn you can then hope people run into it, or follow in terms of, I should say, you're hoping they run into it, or you can use like a teleport never swap character to then put them inside this radius. And that would yield more benefit from it. But for me personally, like if you're playing with a huntsman in your first if you're playing with a huntsman who wants to go first, they're gonna have to invest a considerate amount of points into it instead of damage. Now that's already a downside to me. This is why I would always recommend having a summoner, because they can get to go first in fight, set things up for you, and it's not at any cost to damage. So yeah, so in order to make it work, that is, I think, the best way to do it, and I really just don't recommend playing that way anyway. So if you, I personally would say it's common because of how you have to set it up, and the best way to make it work is a suboptimal setup, in my opinion. But it could go in uncommon if you were to use it in the most optimal way, I guess. But yeah, for me it's common. I struggle to find situations to really justify using it, let alone have it take a memory. So for me it's just a no-go, but I could understand maybe why it'd be uncommon for a certain setup, but for me, straight in the common. So yeah, earlier I said about the lack of ways of spending source for a huntsman when I was talking about the far side, and the reason for that is because I don't really rate the source skills for the huntsman at all. I think they're both, I don't think either of them are good choices. So we'll start off with Arrow Spray, which is 3 AP, 1 source point, 2 memory, which is quite a big investment for something that's pretty poor in my eyes. Both these source points really truly thrive in the same way. So and how you need to set these up to be really valuable is either you're against a really large foe, so all the arrows are hitting, or like if you're fighting a good number of enemies and the arrows are hitting them all. So it needs a particular circumstance to be super valuable, and I don't really like that because that doesn't come across very often. And the other major downside to the arrow spray is that you kind of need to be up in their face in order to hit all your arrows. So there's 2 negatives I can think of off the top of my head for this. One, you're kind of exposing your position by moving straight into the kill zone, so to speak. But also, you're losing all the Huntsman bonuses that you would get if you were on high ground. And that is really the big reason I really don't like this. It kind of is counterproductive to what you want to be doing. You kind of want to be on high ground, safe distance, increasing your damage. This is telling you not to do that and fight against your natural urges, instincts, I should say. So, considering all the investment you have to make, and then those other situations you need for it to be for it to tick the box, it's just not worth the hassle. So Arrow Spray for me goes straight in the common, and then you have Arrow Storm, which is even heavier investment than the Arrow Spray. You have 3 memory, 3 source points. 5 Huntsman, but 5 Huntsman's easy to achieve. So this is so it's the same in the sense that you need a big enemy or a big group of enemies in a particular area for it to really become valuable. You can use this from high ground, which is good, but the downside alongside the Arrow Spray is that it's just extra investments. If you're putting points into Polymorph instead of Warfare Huntsman, instead you're losing out on damage that you can have. So again, take into consideration all the sacrifices you have to make in order to use this. Again, best just left alone in my opinion. So for me, both of these are in the common. So just to recap, we have Tactical Retreat and the Ballistic Shot in the unique tier, Ricochet, Barrage, Elemental Arrowheads in Legendary, Assassinate, Marksman Fang in Epic, Skyshot, and First Aid in Rare, Pindown in Uncommon, and then in the common tier we have Glitter Dust, Farsight, Reactive Shot, Arrow Spray, and Arrow Storm. Any comments, feel free to leave them down below, let me know what your feelings are. But for now, I'm out, so thanks for watching, see you guys in the next one.